The piano had survived 3 river crossings, 2 mountain passes, and 1 near-fatal encounter with a band of outlaws who thankfully had no interest in musical instruments. Carter Owens wiped the sweat from his brow as he guided his wagon through the dusty streets of White Pine, Nevada, in the scorching heat of July 1878. The massive Steinway grand piano, wrapped in layers of canvas and rope, had been his constant companion for the past 2 months, and he would be damned if he let anything happen to it now, just hours from its final destination. The job had seemed simple enough back in San Francisco. A wealthy mine owner named Augustus Wellington had ordered the finest piano money could buy for his daughter, who was arriving from Boston to join him in the Nevada territory. The pay was exceptional, enough to keep Carter's freight business afloat for another year, maybe 2 if he was careful. What he had not anticipated was the sheer difficulty of transporting such a delicate instrument across some of the most unforgiving terrain in the American West. Carter was 32 years old, though the sun and wind had etched lines around his eyes that made him look older. He had been in the freight business since he was 18, learning the trade from his father before a winter fever had taken the old man 6 years back. Since then, Carter had built a reputation for getting cargo where it needed to go, no matter the obstacles. But this piano had tested every ounce of his skill and patience. The Wellington mansion sat on a hillside overlooking the town, a grand 3-story structure that seemed almost absurd in its opulence compared to the rough mining settlement below. White Pine had sprung up almost overnight when silver was discovered in the nearby hills, and while some had struck it rich, most lived in conditions barely better than the mines themselves. The Wellington house stood as a monument to what silver could buy. Carter guided his wagon up the winding road, his team of 6 horses straining against the weight. He had reinforced the wagon bed twice during the journey, knowing that the slightest crack or weakness could spell disaster for the precious cargo. As he approached the circular drive in front of the mansion, he saw a small group waiting on the veranda. Augustus Wellington was easy to spot, a portly man in his 50s wearing a suit far too heavy for the Nevada summer. Beside him stood a woman who made Carter momentarily forget about the piano, the horses, and everything else. She was tall and slender, with dark auburn hair pulled back in an elegant style that seemed impractical for the desert heat. Her dress was a deep green that brought out the color of her eyes, which watched his approach with an expression of barely contained excitement. This had to be Zara Wellington, though Carter had been led to believe she was some spoiled Eastern girl who would turn her nose up at the rough Western town. The woman on the veranda did not look spoiled. She looked alive with anticipation. "Mr. Owens," Augustus called out as Carter brought the wagon to a halt. "Right on schedule, I see. Excellent, excellent." Carter climbed down from the wagon seat, his muscles aching from the long day's drive. "Mr. Wellington, I have your piano safe and sound just as promised." Zara stepped forward, her hands clasped together. "May I see it? Please, I have been waiting so long." Her voice had the refined accent of Boston breeding, but there was warmth in it that caught Carter off guard. He nodded and moved to the back of the wagon, carefully beginning to untie the ropes that held the canvas in place. Zara followed him, close enough that he caught the scent of lavender despite the dust and sweat that covered him. "I must confess, I was skeptical when Father said he was having a piano transported overland," she said, watching his practiced hands work. "It seemed an impossible task." "Nothing is impossible, madam," Carter replied. "Just takes planning and patience." He pulled back the final layer of canvas, revealing the gleaming mahogany surface of the Steinway. Zara gasped, actually gasped, and Carter felt an unexpected swell of pride. He had kept it perfect, not a scratch or dent despite everything the journey had thrown at them. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Mr. Owens, you have performed a miracle." Augustus Wellington cleared his throat. "Yes, yes, very impressive. Now, how do we get it into the house?" This was the part Carter had been planning for weeks. He had sent a letter ahead from Salt Lake City, requesting that Wellington hire 8 strong men to assist with the unloading and placement. The mine owner had complied, and soon Carter was directing the operation with the precision of a general commanding troops. The piano had to be lifted, not dragged, and carried up the front steps with absolute care. Zara stayed close throughout the entire process, offering words of encouragement to the workers and watching Carter with an expression he could not quite read. It took nearly 2 hours to get the piano safely into the music room, a spacious chamber on the first floor with tall windows that overlooked the valley. Carter personally supervised the final placement, making sure the instrument sat level and stable on the hardwood floor. "Perfect," Zara said, running her hand along the polished wood. "Mr. Owens, you have my deepest gratitude. This piano means more to me than you could possibly know." Carter removed his dusty hat, suddenly aware of how filthy he must look compared to the pristine elegance of the room. "Just doing my job, madam." "Nonsense," she said, turning to face him fully. "You have done far more than transport a piano. You have brought me a piece of home, a connection to the life I left behind." Augustus Wellington entered the room, pulling out a thick envelope from his jacket. "Your payment, Mr. Owens, as agreed, and a bonus for arriving on the date specified." Carter took the envelope, feeling the weight of the coins inside. It was more money than he had seen in one place for a long time. "Much obliged, Mr. Wellington. Will you stay for supper?" Zara asked suddenly. "I insist. You must be exhausted from your journey, and I would love to hear about your travels." Her father frowned slightly, but Zara met his gaze with a determination that suggested this was not the first time she had gone against his wishes. Augustus sighed. "Yes, of course. We can hardly send the man away without a proper meal. Though perhaps you would like to wash up first, Mr. Owens." Carter looked down at his trail-worn clothes and dust-covered boots. "That might be wise, sir." A servant showed him to a washroom, where he cleaned himself as best he could, and even borrowed a clean shirt that someone found for him. It was slightly too small across the shoulders, but it would do. When he returned to the main floor, he was led to a dining room that could have seated 20 people comfortably. The table was set with china and crystal that probably cost more than his entire wagon. Zara had changed into a lighter dress of pale blue, and she smiled when he entered. "Much better, Mr. Owens. Please sit beside me. I want to hear everything about your journey." The meal was elaborate, course after course of food prepared by a cook who clearly knew her craft. Carter found himself relaxing despite the formal setting, drawn out by Zara's genuine interest in his stories. He told her about crossing the Sierra Nevada, about the night they had camped beside a crystal-clear lake, with the piano sitting on the wagon like some strange monument to civilization in the wilderness. He told her about the outlaws who had stopped them near the Nevada border, how they had laughed when they saw what he was carrying and rode away shaking their heads. "They said nobody would pay enough to make hauling a piano worth the trouble," Carter said, smiling at the memory. "I did not tell them how much your father was actually paying." Augustus Wellington had been mostly quiet during the meal, eating steadily and watching the interaction between his daughter and the freight hauler with a thoughtful expression. Now he spoke up. Zara was quite accomplished in Boston. She performed at several prestigious venues. "Father exaggerates," Zara said, though a faint blush colored her cheeks. I played at a few charity events and society gatherings, nothing worthy of such praise. Would you play something now? Carter asked, surprising himself with his boldness. I have been traveling with that piano for 2 months, and I have never heard what it sounds like. Zara's eyes lit up. I would be delighted. Shall we retire to the music room? They moved to the other room, Augustus settling into a leather chair while Zara took her place at the piano bench. She lifted the lid, revealing the ivory keys, and ran her fingers over them gently, as if greeting an old friend. Then she began to play. Carter had heard piano music before, tinny performances in saloons and dance halls, mechanical renditions that served as background noise for drinking and gambling. This was something else entirely. The music that flowed from Zara's fingers was alive, each note pure and clear, and full of emotion. She played a piece he did not recognize, something classical and complex, and he watched her hands dance across the keys with practiced grace. But it was her face that truly captivated him. She was lost in the music, her eyes closed, a slight smile on her lips. She played like she was pouring her soul into the instrument, and Carter felt something shift inside his chest. He had spent 2 months protecting this piano, treating it like precious cargo, but he had never understood what it truly represented until this moment. When the piece ended, Carter realized he had been holding his breath. "That was incredible," he said softly. Zara opened her eyes and looked at him, and there was something in her gaze that made his heart beat faster. "Thank you. It feels wonderful to play again. I have missed it terribly during the journey west." "How long have you been playing?" Carter asked. "Since I was 6 years old. My mother insisted on it, said that every proper young lady should be accomplished in music." A shadow passed over her face. "She passed away 3 years ago. Playing helps me feel close to her." Augustus stood abruptly. "It is getting late. Mr. Owens, you are welcome to stay in one of our guest rooms tonight. No sense in trying to find lodging in town at this hour." Carter wanted to refuse, felt he should refuse, but the thought of a real bed after months of sleeping on the ground or in cheap boarding houses was too tempting. "That is very generous, sir. I accept." The guest room was more luxurious than any place Carter had ever slept. The bed had actual springs and a thick mattress, and there were fresh linens that smelled of soap and sunshine. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, unable to stop thinking about Zara's music and the way she had looked at him during dinner. He was being foolish, he knew. She was the daughter of a wealthy mine owner, educated in Boston, accomplished and refined. He was a freight hauler who spent most of his time covered in trail dust, eating beans from a can and sleeping under the stars. They existed in completely different worlds, and the fact that those worlds had briefly intersected did not change the fundamental truth of their situations. But when he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of auburn hair and green eyes, and music that seemed to reach inside his chest and play his heart like an instrument. Morning came too soon. Carter woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of piano music drifting up from below. He dressed quickly in his own clothes, which someone had thoughtfully cleaned and pressed during the night, and made his way downstairs following the sound. Zara was at the piano again, playing something lighter and more cheerful than the previous night's selection. She wore a simple day dress of yellow cotton, and her hair hung in a long braid down her back. She looked younger this way, less like the elegant society lady and more like someone who might actually fit in this rough western town. She finished the piece and turned to find him standing in the doorway. "Good morning, Mr. Owens. I hope I did not wake you." "Not at all," he said, though in truth the music probably had pulled him from sleep. He did not mind. "You play beautifully. Would you like some breakfast? Cook makes wonderful biscuits." They ate in the smaller breakfast room, just the two of them. Augustus had already left for his office in town, Zara explained, overseeing the operations of his various mining interests. She asked Carter about his business, about where he lived when he was not on the road, about his family. He told her about his father, about learning the freight trade, about the satisfaction of delivering cargo safely to its destination. He told her about his small house in Sacramento, California, which he rarely saw since he was always traveling. He told her things he had not talked about in years, drawn out by her genuine interest and the way she listened with her full attention. "What will you transport next?" she asked, spreading jam on a biscuit. "Whatever needs transporting," Carter said. "I have a load of mining equipment waiting in Carson City, needs to go up to Virginia City. After that, there is talk of a cattle drive that might need some supplies moved alongside it." "So you will be leaving soon," Zara said, and was that disappointment in her voice. "This afternoon, most likely. No sense in delaying. The equipment is on a schedule." Zara set down her biscuit, her appetite apparently gone. "Of course. You must have many obligations." They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Carter cleared his throat. "Miss Wellington, I hope this is not too forward, but I was wondering if I might write to you occasionally. About my travels, I mean. You seemed interested in the stories, and it would be nice to have someone to share them with." Her face brightened immediately. "I would like that very much. And you must call me Zara. Miss Wellington sounds terribly formal after you have crossed half the continent to bring me a piano." "Only if you call me Carter," he said, smiling. "Carter," she repeated, as if testing how the name felt. "I like that." He left White Pine 2 hours later, his wagon considerably lighter without the piano. Zara stood on the veranda watching him go, and he turned back 3 times before the road curved and the mansion disappeared from view. His chest felt tight, an ache that had nothing to do with physical exertion. The trip to Carson City took 2 days. Carter spent most of it composing a letter in his head, trying to find the right words to capture what he wanted to say without overstepping the bounds of propriety. He finally wrote it out in his cramped room at a Carson City boarding house, telling her about the journey, about a family of deer he had seen at dawn, about his thoughts on the changing landscape as cities and towns spread across what had been wilderness. He posted the letter the next morning and tried not to think about whether she would actually write back. 3 weeks later in Virginia City, he received her reply. The boarding house keeper handed him the envelope with a knowing smile, and Carter took it up to his room to read in private. Her handwriting was elegant, each letter perfectly formed, and he read her words slowly, savoring them. She wrote about life in White Pine, about the challenge of adapting to a place so different from Boston. She wrote about playing the piano every day, about how it helped her feel less alone in this strange new world. She wrote about missing their conversation, about hoping he was well and safe in his travels. At the bottom, she had added, "Please write again when you have the chance. Your letters make the desert feel less empty." Carter wrote back that same evening. So began a correspondence that lasted through the summer and into the fall. Carter's work kept him constantly moving across Nevada and California, hauling everything from mining equipment to luxury goods, from building supplies to personal possessions for families heading west. But no matter where he was, he found time to write to Zara, and her letters followed him from town to town, forwarded by a network of postal workers and boarding housekeepers who grew familiar with the routine. Her letters became the highlight of his existence. She wrote about learning to navigate White Pine society, about the weekly dances at the town hall, and the elaborate dinners her father hosted for business associates. She wrote about exploring the surrounding countryside, always accompanied by a servant her father insisted on for safety. She wrote about the piano, about learning new pieces and sometimes composing little melodies of her own. Carter wrote about the vast landscapes he crossed, about the people he met on the road, about the satisfaction of a job well done, and the loneliness of nights spent far from anything resembling home. He found himself writing things he had never told anyone, thoughts and feelings he had kept locked away for years. In late September, his route took him back through White Pine. He told himself it was purely business, that he had freight to deliver to the town, and it made perfect sense to stop there. But his hands shook slightly as he guided his wagon up the main street, and his heart pounded when he saw the Wellington mansion in the distance. He had sent a letter a week earlier, mentioning that he might be passing through. Zara's reply had been brief but warm. "Please do call if you find the time. I would very much enjoy seeing you again." Carter made his delivery to the general store first, unloading crates of goods from San Francisco. Then he took the time to wash up at the public bathhouse, even paying extra for hot water and a shave from the barber. He bought a new shirt from the dry goods store, nothing fancy but at least clean and well-fitting. Finally, when he could find no more excuses to delay, he drove his wagon up to the Wellington house. Zara must have been watching for him, because she appeared on the veranda before he had even set the brake. She wore a dress of deep burgundy, and her hair was arranged in soft curls that framed her face. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. "Carter," she called out, and the joy in her voice made his chest tighten. "You came." He climbed down from the wagon seat, suddenly nervous. "I said I would." She hurried down the steps, propriety forgotten, and stopped just in front of him. For a moment they simply looked at each other, months of letters condensed into a single charged moment. Then she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Come inside," she said. "I want to hear everything. Your letters are wonderful, but they cannot compare to hearing your voice." They spent the afternoon in the music room. Zara played for him, pieces she had been practicing, little compositions she had created. Between songs, they talked, the conversation flowing as easily as it had in their letters. Carter told her about a harrowing crossing of the Carson River during a flash flood, about a family of settlers he had helped when their wagon broke down in the middle of nowhere. Zara told him about the first time she had ventured into one of her father's mines, about her growing appreciation for the harsh beauty of the Nevada landscape. "I hated it at first," she admitted. "After Boston, White Pine seemed impossibly crude and rough. But there is something honest about this place. People are direct, straightforward. Back east, everything was layers and layers of social expectation and pretense. Here, at least you know where you stand." "And where do you stand?" Carter asked. "Do you think you will stay?" Zara's fingers paused on the piano keys. "I do not know. Father expects me to eventually marry someone from his social circle, some mining investor or railroad man. He has already introduced me to several supposedly eligible bachelors." She wrinkled her nose slightly. "They are all perfectly polite and utterly boring." Carter should have left it alone, should have changed the subject, but the words came out anyway. "What do you want, Zara?" She turned to look at him fully, her green eyes intense. "I want to feel the way I do when I play music. Alive. Connected to something real and true. I want to matter to someone because of who I am, not because of my father's money or my accomplishments or my social standing." "You matter to me," Carter said quietly. The air between them seemed to crackle with sudden electricity. Zara stood from the piano bench, taking a step toward him. "Do I?" He stood as well, his heart racing. "These past months your letters have been the best part of my days. When something happens, good or bad, you are the first person I want to tell about it. I know I have no right to feel this way. You are far above my station, and I have nothing to offer you except a life of uncertainty and hard work, but I cannot help how I feel." Zara closed the distance between them, reaching up to touch his face gently. "Carter Owens, you are the only person in this entire territory who sees me as anything more than Augustus Wellington's daughter or a Boston debutante playing at Frontier Life. You write to me about beauty and hardship, about the world beyond these walls. You make me feel like I could be part of that world, like I could be more than what everyone expects me to be." "Zara," he breathed, his hand coming up to cover hers against his cheek. The sound of the front door opening made them both step apart quickly. Augustus Wellington's voice called out, "Zara, whose wagon is that outside?" "Mr. Owens has come to call, Father," Zara replied, her composure returning quickly though her cheeks were flushed. Augustus entered the music room, his expression guarded. "Mr. Owens, an unexpected pleasure." "I trust this is not a business call." "No, sir," Carter said, standing straight. "I was passing through and wanted to pay my respects to Miss Wellington." The mine owner's eyes moved between them, clearly sensing something in the atmosphere. "I see. Well, I am sure my daughter has appreciated the visit. However, we have dinner plans this evening with the Hendersons. Zara, you should begin preparing." It was a dismissal, polite but firm. Zara's jaw tightened slightly, but she nodded. "Of course, Father." Carter moved toward the door, but Zara caught his hand briefly out of her father's line of sight. The touch was fleeting but electric. "Will you be in town long?" she asked. "Just tonight," he said. "I have to deliver freight to Carson City by the end of the week." "Then I hope you travel safely," she said formally, though her eyes conveyed much more. Carter left the mansion feeling both elated and frustrated. The memory of Zara's hand on his face, her words about what she wanted, played over and over in his mind. But the reality of their situation was undeniable. Augustus Wellington would never approve of a freight hauler courting his daughter. The man had plans for Zara, plans that certainly did not include someone like Carter. He spent the night at a boarding house in town, tossing and turning on the narrow bed. Part of him wanted to leave White Pine and never come back, to save himself from the inevitable heartbreak. But a larger part could not imagine never seeing Zara again, never hearing her play or sharing conversation or receiving her letters. In the morning, he found a note slipped under his door. He recognized Zara's handwriting immediately. "Carter, please do not stop writing to me. Whatever my father may think or plan, my friendship with you matters more than I can express. I know the obstacles before us, but I also know that what we share is rare and precious. Please be patient with me while I determine what I truly want for my life. Yours always, Zara." He read the note 3 times, then carefully folded it and placed it in his shirt pocket close to his heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them. For Zara, he would be patient. He would wait. The next few months tested that patience severely. Carter's work kept him busy, which was both a blessing and a curse. When he was on the road, focused on navigating difficult terrain or managing stubborn pack animals, he could sometimes go hours without thinking about Zara. But the evenings were hard, and the nights were harder, filled with thoughts of her and frustration at the distance between them. Their letters continued, though they had to be more careful now. Augustus Wellington had clearly become suspicious of their correspondence. Zara arranged for her letters to be sent to various towns along Carter's usual routes, and he did the same, addressing his letters to a friend of Zara's in town who passed them along discreetly. Through the letters, Carter learned that Augustus was indeed pushing potential suitors on his daughter. She described dinners with the Hendersons' eldest son, a pompous young man who talked endlessly about his father's mining claims. She wrote about a railroad investor from San Francisco who visited for a week and spent the entire time lecturing her about the importance of rail expansion. She made these men sound ridiculous, and Carter laughed at her descriptions, but underneath the humor he sensed her growing desperation. "Father is becoming insistent," she wrote in November. "He believes I have had enough time to adjust to life here and should now fulfill my duty by making an advantageous marriage. He does not understand that I would rather spend my life alone than with someone I cannot respect or care for." Carter's response was carefully worded but honest. "I wish I could offer you an alternative, but I fear I would only make your situation more difficult. A freight hauler cannot compete with railroad investors and mining heirs. All I can give you is my heart, which has been yours since the day you first played that piano." Her next letter arrived 3 weeks later, forwarded from Virginia City to a small town near Lake Tahoe, where Carter was delivering supplies to a new logging camp. The envelope was thicker than usual, and when he opened it, he found not just a letter but also a pressed flower, a small purple wildflower she must have found somewhere in the Nevada desert. "Carter, I have been doing a great deal of thinking. All my life I have done what was expected of me. I learned piano because my mother wanted me to. I attended the right schools, made the right friends, performed at the right social functions. When Father decided to move west, I came along obediently, even though it meant leaving everything familiar behind. But for the first time, I find myself wanting something just for me, regardless of what anyone else thinks or expects. I want you. I want the life we might build together. I know it would not be easy, and I know I would be giving up material comfort and social position. But those things mean nothing compared to the joy I feel when I read your letters or the way my heart races when I remember that afternoon in the music room. Tell me that I am not foolish to feel this way. Tell me that you want this too." Carter sat in his small room at the logging camp, the letter trembling in his hands, and felt tears prick his eyes. He had never cried over a woman before, had barely cried at all since his father's funeral, but Zara's words broke something open inside him. She was offering him everything he wanted, everything he had not dared to truly hope for. But accepting her offer meant destroying her relationship with her father. It meant pulling her away from wealth and security into a life of uncertainty. Could he really ask her to make that sacrifice? He spent 2 days composing his response, writing and rewriting until he had something that felt true and honest. "Zara, you are not foolish. What you feel is exactly what I feel, and it grows stronger with each passing day. But I need you to be absolutely certain about what you would be choosing. My life is not glamorous. I spend weeks at a time on the road, living rough, working hard. The money is decent but unpredictable. I have a small house in Sacramento that is barely furnished because I am never there long enough to make it a home. If you choose me, you choose that life. Your father will likely disown you, and you will lose access to the world you have always known. I want you more than I have ever wanted anything, but I could not live with myself if you regretted choosing me. Think carefully, my darling Zara. Think with your head as well as your heart. If after considering everything you still want this, then I am yours completely. I will come to White Pine and speak to your father properly. We will do this right or not at all." He sent the letter, and then threw himself into his work with renewed intensity, trying to keep his mind occupied while he waited for her response. The logging camp job turned into a longer engagement than expected when winter weather closed some of the mountain passes, trapping him in the high country for nearly a month. By the time he made it back to a town with postal service, It was early January of 1879, and he had 3 letters from Zara waiting for him. The first 2 were updates about her life, carefully neutral in case they fell into the wrong hands. But the third, dated just a week earlier, made his pulse race. Carter, I am certain. I have spent my whole life being careful and proper and obedient, and what has it brought me? A gilded cage in the middle of a desert and a future mapped out by someone else's ambitions. You offer me freedom and choice and love. That is worth more than all the silver in Nevada. Come to White Pine. Speak to Father. Whatever happens, we will face it together. I love you, Carter Owens. I think I have loved you since the day you delivered my piano, covered in dust, but so proud of having kept it safe. Come soon. Carter read those 3 words over and over. I love you. She loved him. He finished his current delivery contracts as quickly as possible, working through exhaustion to complete his obligations. By late January, he was finally free, his schedule clear, his wagon empty. He pointed his team toward White Pine and did not stop except to rest the horses. The town looked the same as it had 5 months earlier, but Carter felt like a different person as he drove down the main street. Last time he had been uncertain, hesitant, afraid to acknowledge his feelings fully. Now he knew exactly what he wanted and was prepared to fight for it. He did not go straight to the Wellington mansion. Instead, he checked into the boarding house and spent the afternoon making himself presentable. He got a haircut and a proper shave, bought new clothes that were appropriate for calling on a young lady, and even purchased a small bouquet of flowers from the woman who ran the town's only greenhouse. As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and pink, Carter finally made his way up to the mansion. His heart pounded as he knocked on the front door. A servant answered, a woman he recognized from his previous visits. Mr. Owens, she said, her expression warming slightly. Miss Wellington will be pleased to see you. Please come in. She led him to the music room where Zara was playing the piano. The piece was something classical and complex, her fingers moving with practiced precision over the keys. But when she looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, she stopped mid-phrase. Carter, she breathed, standing so quickly that the piano bench nearly toppled. They stood frozen for a moment, drinking in the sight of each other after months apart. She wore a simple dress of deep blue, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and nervous and hopeful all at once. You came, she said. You asked me to, he replied, moving into the room, and I could not stay away any longer. She crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. I meant every word I wrote. I love you, Carter. I want to be with you, whatever that means. And I love you, he said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. I have loved you for months now, but before we take this any further, I need to speak with your father, properly. Zara's expression became worried. He will not approve. I have tried to talk to him about you, and he refuses to even discuss it. He sees you as unsuitable, beneath our social standing. Then I will have to change his mind, Carter said with more confidence than he felt. They talked for over an hour, making plans, discussing possibilities. Zara was adamant that she would choose Carter regardless of her father's opinion, but Carter insisted on at least trying to gain Augustus's blessing. He owed them both that much. Finally, they heard the front door open and Augustus's heavy footsteps in the hall. Zara squeezed Carter's hand once, then called out, "Father, could you join us in the music room, please?" Augustus entered, his expression darkening when he saw Carter. "Mr. Owens." "I was not aware we were expecting you." "No, sir," Carter said, standing straight and meeting the older man's gaze. "But I need to speak with you about a matter of great importance." "Father, please," Zara said. "Hear him out." Augustus looked between them, his jaw tightening. "Very well, speak." Carter took a deep breath. "Mr. Wellington, I have come to ask your permission to court your daughter. I know I am not the sort of man you had in mind for her. I am a freight hauler with a modest income and no social connections. But I love Zara deeply, and I believe she loves me. I would spend every day of my life working to make her happy and to give her a good life. Absolutely not, Augustus said immediately. You are correct that you are not the sort of man I envisioned for my daughter. Zara is meant for better things than following a freight wagon across the territory. She deserves stability, security, a position in society. What Zara deserves is to be happy, Carter said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. She deserves to be with someone who values her for who she is, not for her family name or accomplishments. Someone who will be a partner, not just a suitable match. You know nothing about what my daughter needs, Augustus shot back. You have dazzled her with romantic notions and pretty words, but reality is far different. What happens when the money runs out? When she is living in squalor while you chase freight contracts across the frontier? How long before she regrets throwing away everything for a passing infatuation? Father, stop, Zara said, her voice sharp. Carter has not dazzled me with anything except honesty. He has been clear about what his life entails, and I am choosing it with full awareness of what I would be leaving behind. Augustus turned to his daughter, his expression pained. Zara, you are emotional right now, but you must think rationally. I have worked my entire life to build something substantial, to ensure your future is secure. If you throw that away for this man, you will be making the biggest mistake of your life. The biggest mistake I could make would be living a life that is not my own, Zara said firmly. I appreciate everything you have done for me, truly I do. But I am 23 years old, Father. I am old enough to make my own choices. Not this choice, Augustus said, his voice rising. I will not allow it. You cannot stop me, Zara replied, her voice sad but resolute. I love Carter, and I am going to be with him whether you approve or not. I would much rather have your blessing, but I will not sacrifice my happiness to meet your expectations. The room fell into tense silence. Augustus looked at his daughter as if seeing her clearly for the first time, recognizing the determination in her eyes. Finally, he turned to Carter. Tell me honestly, can you provide for her? Can you give her a comfortable life? Carter chose his words carefully. I make a decent living, enough to support a household. We would not live in luxury, but we would not want for necessities either. I own my own freight business and equipment, and I have built a solid reputation. Work is steady. Where would you live? I have a house in Sacramento. It is small, but in a good neighborhood. I would be on the road less if I had someone waiting at home. I could take shorter contracts, stay closer to California. Augustus rubbed his face with both hands, suddenly looking older and tired. Zara, if I forbid this, will you truly defy me? I will, she said quietly. I do not want to, but I will. He was silent for a long moment, then sighed heavily. Your mother would have known what to say to you. She always understood you better than I did. When she died, I thought bringing you west would give us a chance to grow closer. Instead, I seem to have driven you toward the first man who showed you kindness. That is not fair, Father, Zara said, moving to stand beside Carter. Carter is not just the first man who showed me kindness. He is the only man who has ever treated me as an equal, who has valued my thoughts and feelings, who has made me feel truly alive. Augustus looked at Carter with an expression that was part resignation, part assessment. If I give you my blessing, what are your intentions? I intend to marry her if she will have me, Carter said without hesitation. I intend to build a life with her, to support her in whatever she wants to pursue, to be the partner she deserves. And the piano, Carter blinked, surprised by the question. Sir, that piano cost a fortune, and I had it transported thousands of miles because I knew how much it would mean to Zara. If she goes with you to Sacramento, can you promise that she will have space for it? That she can continue to play and develop her talent?" Understanding dawned. The piano was not just an instrument to Augustus. It was a connection to his late wife, a symbol of everything he wanted to give his daughter. "My house has a front parlor," Carter said. "It is empty right now because I have never had anything worth putting in it. But it would be perfect for the piano. I give you my word that Zara will have her music always." Augustus studied Carter's face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Very well. You have my conditional blessing to court my daughter. But understand this, Mr. Owens. If you hurt her, if you fail to provide for her, if you give me any reason to believe she would be better off without you, I will use every resource at my disposal to bring her home." "I understand, sir," Carter said, "and I accept those terms." "Father, thank you," Zara said, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him tightly. "Thank you for trusting me." Augustus held his daughter, his own eyes wet. "You are so much like your mother, stubborn and brave and entirely too willing to follow your heart over your head. I just hope you are as right about this as she was about me." That night, Carter had dinner with the Wellingtons again, but the atmosphere was entirely different from his first meal there. Augustus asked probing questions about his business, his plans, his background. Carter answered honestly, holding nothing back. Zara watched the exchange with barely concealed anxiety, her hand occasionally finding Carter's under the table. By the end of the evening, Augustus seemed, if not entirely pleased, at least resigned to the situation. "How long before you can marry?" he asked bluntly. Carter glanced at Zara. "I had not thought that far ahead, sir. I suppose we should court properly for a few months at least." "Nonsense," Augustus said, surprising them both. "If you are going to do this, do it properly. Have the wedding here in White Pine. Give me that much at least. Let me show the town that I support this union, that my daughter is not running away in scandal." Zara looked uncertain. "Father, that is generous, but Carter and I do not need a big wedding." "Perhaps not, but I do," Augustus said quietly. "I need to see my only daughter married properly, the way her mother would have wanted. Will you give me that?" Zara's expression softened. "Of course, father." They set the date for early April, giving them time to prepare, but not so long that Augustus could change his mind or second-guess his decision. Carter spent the next 2 months in a whirlwind of activity. He wrapped up his existing contracts, arranged for a business partner to handle freight deliveries he could not personally complete, and made improvements to his Sacramento house. He also spent every moment he could spare in White Pine, properly courting Zara under her father's watchful eye. They took walks around town, always with a chaperone as propriety demanded. They attended church services together and the occasional social event. And Zara played the piano for him every evening, filling the Wellington house with music. "I have been composing something," she told him one evening in late March. "A piece for our wedding. I want to play it during the ceremony." "I would love that," Carter said, though he could barely imagine what such an event would look like. Augustus had taken over the wedding planning with unexpected enthusiasm, turning what Carter had envisioned as a simple ceremony into a major social event. "Father is inviting half the territory," Zara said, sounding amused. "I think he wants to prove to everyone that his daughter is making a respectable match, even if the groom is not from society. Does it bother you that I am not from that world?" Zara took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Carter, you are from a better world. One built on honest work and real accomplishment, not inherited wealth or social position. I could not be prouder to marry you." The wedding took place on April 10, 1879, in the White Pine Community Church. The building was packed with guests, most of whom Carter did not know. Augustus had indeed invited everyone of importance in the territory, from mining investors to government officials. But Carter only had eyes for Zara. She walked down the aisle in a dress of ivory silk, her hair adorned with small white flowers. She looked radiant, and when she smiled at him, Carter felt like the luckiest man alive. The ceremony itself was traditional, the words familiar and comforting. But when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Carter kissed Zara for the first time as her husband, the world seemed to shift on its axis. At the reception, held at the Wellington mansion, Zara played her composition on the Steinway. The piece was beautiful, alternating between gentle, romantic passages and soaring, joyful crescendos. She played with her eyes closed, lost in the music, and Carter understood that she was expressing through the piano everything she felt but could not put into words. When she finished, the guests erupted in applause. Augustus stood and raised his glass. "To my daughter Zara and her husband Carter, may their life together be filled with as much beauty and harmony as the music we just heard." Carter raised his own glass, meeting Augustus's eyes across the room. The older man nodded slightly, a gesture of acceptance and perhaps even respect. They would never be close, Carter suspected, but they had reached an understanding. Both of them wanted Zara to be happy, and that shared goal was enough to bridge the gap between them. Late that night, after the guests had departed and they were finally alone in the guest room prepared for them, Zara stood at the window looking out at the desert landscape silvered by moonlight. "What are you thinking?" Carter asked, coming to stand behind her. "That I am happy," she said simply. "Happier than I have ever been, and a little scared of how much that happiness depends on you." He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest. "I am scared too, scared of disappointing you, of not being enough." She turned in his arms to face him. "You are more than enough. You are everything I want." They left for Sacramento a week later, giving Augustus time to arrange for the piano to be shipped by rail. It would arrive a month after them, and Carter spent that month preparing the front parlor to receive it. He had the floors refinished, the walls painted, and even purchased a pair of comfortable chairs so he could sit and listen while Zara played. The house was indeed small compared to the Wellington mansion, but Zara took to it with enthusiasm. She sewed curtains for the windows, planted flowers in the tiny garden, and turned the spare room into a music library where she could store her sheet music and practice when the piano arrived. "It is perfect," she declared one evening as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset. "Our first real home together. You do not miss White Pine, or your father's house." "I miss father sometimes," she admitted, "but not the house or the life there. This is real, Carter, this is ours." The piano arrived in early June, and Carter supervised its installation with the same care he had used when transporting it originally. When it was finally in place, Zara sat down and played the piece she had composed for their wedding, and Carter felt his eyes well up with emotion. "Play something else," he said when she finished. "Play whatever makes you happiest." She played for over an hour, moving from classical pieces to popular songs to her own compositions. Carter sat in one of the new chairs and listened, marveling at how this woman and this instrument had transformed his life. He had spent years hauling freight across the frontier, never thinking much beyond the next contract, the next delivery. Now he had a wife, a home, a future that stretched out before him full of possibility. As summer turned to fall, they settled into a comfortable rhythm. Carter took shorter contracts, staying within a few days' ride of Sacramento. Zara found students who wanted piano lessons, teaching in their home and earning her own money, which she seemed to take great pride in. They made friends in the neighborhood, attended church on Sundays, and built a life together that was ordinary in the best possible way. In October, Zara told him she was pregnant. Carter was terrified and elated in equal measure. He worried about providing for a child, about being a good father, about all the things that could go wrong. But Zara was calm and confident, and her certainty helped steady him. "We will figure it out together," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "Just like we have figured out everything else." Their son was born in May of 1880, a healthy baby with Zara's green eyes and Carter's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Carter's father, and Augustus made the trip from White Pine to meet his grandson. The older man held the baby with surprising tenderness, tears streaming down his face. "He looks like Zara did when she was born," Augustus said. Same expression, like he is already judging the world and finding it wanting. Zara laughed, and Carter saw a healing happen between father and daughter. Augustus stayed for 2 weeks, and by the time he left, the tension that had existed between them since the wedding had faded. He might not have chosen Carter for his daughter, but he could see that she was happy, and that was enough. The years that followed were full and busy. Carter's freight business grew steadily, and he eventually hired 2 other men to help with deliveries, allowing him to stay closer to home. Zara continued teaching piano and began performing occasionally at local events and churches. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who showed an early aptitude for music, much to his mother's delight. In 1882, Zara gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. 2 years later, another son arrived, James. The house that had seemed adequately sized for 2 people became cramped with 5, and Carter began looking for a larger property. He found a house on the outskirts of Sacramento, with more rooms and a yard large enough for the children to play. But before they could move, a problem arose. The music room in the new house could not accommodate the Steinway. The doorways were too narrow, and there was no clear path to get the piano inside. "We will make it work," Zara said, though Carter could see the disappointment in her eyes. "Perhaps we could keep the old house just for the piano, and I could go there to practice." But Carter had a different idea. He hired a carpenter and an architect, and together they designed an addition to the new house. A proper music room with double doors wide enough to accommodate the piano and windows that would fill the space with natural light. It cost more than they could easily afford, but seeing Zara's face when he showed her the plans made every penny worth it. They moved into the new house in the spring of 1885, and the piano took its place of honor in the music room. Zara wept when she first played it in the new space, the sound filling the house and spilling out the open windows into the yard where the children played. Augustus visited several times a year, each visit a little easier than the last. He doted on his grandchildren and grudgingly admitted that Carter had exceeded his expectations. "You have made my daughter happy," he said during a visit in 1887, "and you have provided well for her and the children. I was wrong to doubt you." "Thank you, sir," Carter said, genuinely moved. "That means a great deal." As the children grew older, they all learned to play piano under their mother's tutelage. Thomas showed real talent, playing with a passion that reminded Carter of Zara. Rose preferred singing to playing, but had a beautiful voice that complemented her mother's piano accompaniment. James was less musically inclined, but enjoyed listening and often sat in the music room while Zara practiced. In 1890, when Thomas was 10 years old, he asked Carter about the story of how his parents met. They were sitting on the porch in the evening, watching the sun set, and Carter took his time answering. "I was hired to transport a piano from San Francisco to White Pine, Nevada," he began. "It was the most difficult job I had ever taken, and there were times I was not sure I could do it. But I made a promise and I kept it. When I delivered that piano, your mother was waiting at the destination. She sat down and played, and the moment I heard her music, everything changed. Because you fell in love? Thomas asked. Because I understood what was truly important, Carter said. I had spent years just getting by, doing my work, moving from place to place without really thinking about why. But your mother's music reminded me that there is beauty and meaning in the world, that some things are worth fighting for. Thomas thought about this. Mother says you saved the piano from outlaws and floods and all sorts of dangers. I did, Carter confirmed. But what I did not know then was that the piano was not the real treasure I was transporting. Meeting your mother, building a life with her, having you and your sisters and brother, that is the real treasure. The piano was just the beginning of the story. The years continued to pass, marked by the usual joys and sorrows of life. Carter's mother, who he had lost touch with during his early years on the road, reconnected with him after learning about his marriage and family. She moved to Sacramento in 1892, living in a small house near theirs, and becoming a beloved presence in the grandchildren's lives. Augustus Wellington passed away in 1895, succumbing to pneumonia during a harsh winter in White Pine. Zara grieved deeply, but she took comfort in knowing that she and her father had reconciled, that their last years together had been marked by love and understanding rather than conflict. Augustus left his considerable fortune divided between Zara and several charitable causes, ensuring that the Owens family would never want for material security. But the money changed little about their daily life. Carter continued working, though he scaled back as he got older, letting his business partners handle more of the operations. Zara continued teaching and playing, her music as beautiful and moving as ever. The children grew up, each finding their own paths. Thomas went to college to study music and eventually became a professor at a conservatory in San Francisco. Rose married a kind young man who worked as a printer and gave Zara and Carter 4 grandchildren. James followed in Carter's footsteps, taking over the freight business and expanding it to include rail transport as well as wagon deliveries. In 1900, Carter and Zara celebrated their 21st wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them. The house was empty with the children all grown and gone, and it felt strange to have so much space after years of noise and activity. "You ever regret it?" Carter asked as they sat in the music room after dinner. "Giving up the life you could have had for this one?" Zara looked at him with surprise and then smiled. "Never. Not for a single moment. This life, our life together, has been everything I ever wanted. I have music, I have love, I have children and grandchildren who fill my days with joy. What more could anyone ask for?" "I just want to make sure you are happy," Carter said. "After everything you gave up." She moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. "Carter, I gave up nothing. I gained everything. That day you delivered the piano, I was lost, uncertain about who I was or what I wanted. You helped me find myself. You gave me the freedom to be who I truly am. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the evening through the open window. After a while, Zara moved to the piano and began to play, her fingers still nimble and sure despite the years. She played the composition she had written for their wedding, the notes as clear and beautiful as they had been 21 years earlier. Carter closed his eyes and listened, transported back to that April day when they had pledged their lives to each other. The years had brought changes, some expected and some surprising, but the foundation of their relationship remained the same. Music and love intertwined so completely that he could not imagine one without the other. When Zara finished playing, she turned to find him watching her. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how lucky I am," he said simply. "About how a piano changed my life in ways I never could have imagined." "The piano did not change your life," Zara said, coming to sit beside him again. "Love did, our love." "You are right," he agreed. "The piano was just the beginning, you are the story." They held each other as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who had taken a chance on love despite all the obstacles and found something worth more than silver or social position or any material treasure. They had found each other, and that was enough. In the years that followed, Carter and Zara continued their quiet life in Sacramento. Carter fully retired from the freight business in 1902, turning everything over to James and his capable management. Zara reduced her teaching schedule but never stopped playing. The music room remained the heart of their home, filled with the sounds of piano melodies that drifted through the house and out into the yard. Their grandchildren visited often, and Zara taught those who showed interest in music. Two of Rose's children inherited their grandmother's talent, and the music room would often ring with multiple generations playing together, Zara guiding her grandchildren through pieces she had mastered decades earlier. In 1905, Thomas organized a concert featuring his mother's compositions. Zara was hesitant at first, uncomfortable with the attention, but Carter encouraged her. "Let people hear the beauty you create," he said. "You have shared it with me for 26 years. Let others experience it too." The concert was held in a small but prestigious hall in San Francisco, and the audience included musicians, professors, and music lovers from across California. Zara played with the same passion and skill that had captivated Carter all those years ago, and the standing ovation at the end brought tears to her eyes. "I am so proud of you," Carter whispered as they stood together after the performance, accepting congratulations from the crowd. "None of this would have been possible without you," Zara replied. "You believed in me when I barely believed in myself." As they grew older, their love deepened in ways that surprised them both. They knew each other so completely, could anticipate each other's thoughts and needs with barely a word spoken. Carter would wake before dawn and make coffee exactly the way Zara liked it, bringing it to her while she sat at the piano practicing. Zara would prepare his favorite meals when his old injuries from years on the freight routes ached in the cold weather, knowing without asking when he needed extra care. In 1910, they celebrated their 31st anniversary with their entire family gathered around them. Children, grandchildren, Carter's mother, who was now in her late 80s, friends they had accumulated over the decades. It was a joyful, chaotic gathering, and as Carter looked around the crowded house, he marveled at the life they had built. "What are you smiling about?" Zara asked, coming to stand beside him. "Just thinking about that day in 1878 when I delivered a piano to White Pine," he said. "If someone had told me then where that delivery would lead, I never would have believed them." "Do you remember what you said when you first heard me play?" Zara asked. "I said it was incredible," Carter recalled. "But what I was really thinking was that I had never heard anything more beautiful in my life, and I was not just talking about the music." Zara leaned her head on his shoulder. "You played my heartstrings that day just as surely as I played the piano. We have been making music together ever since." The gathering continued around them, but for a moment they stood apart from it, two people who had chosen each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. The piano that had brought them together still stood in the music room, its polished mahogany surface gleaming in the afternoon light. It had survived impossible journeys and countless moves, had filled the air with music for over 30 years, and showed no signs of stopping. Just like their love, Carter thought. Built to last, carefully tended and growing more beautiful with each passing year. As the sun began to set, Zara excused herself from the party and went to the music room. Carter followed, knowing without asking what she wanted. She sat at the piano bench, and he took his usual seat in the chair he had purchased all those years ago. She began to play, her fingers moving over the keys with practiced grace, and the family gradually quieted, drawn by the music. The children and grandchildren filled the music room doorway, watching as Zara played and Carter listened, the same scene that had played out thousands of times over the course of their marriage. This was their story, told not in words but in music, in shared glances, in the comfortable companionship of two people who had built a life together one day at a time. When the last notes faded, the room remained silent for a long moment. Then little Catherine, Rose's youngest daughter, who was only 5 years old, spoke up. "Grandmother, will you teach me to play like that?" Zara smiled and patted the bench beside her. "Come here, sweetheart. Let me show you where to put your fingers." And so the music continued, passing from one generation to the next, a legacy of beauty and love that had started with a freight hauler's promise to safely deliver a piano, and a young woman's brave choice to follow her heart. Carter Owens and Zara Wellington Owens lived out their days in Sacramento, surrounded by family and filled with the music that had brought them together. They faced the challenges that come with aging, supporting each other through illness and loss, celebrating victories and comforting each other through sorrows. But through it all, the foundation of their relationship remained unshaken. Carter passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1918, at the age of 72. Zara held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she took comfort in knowing they had lived a full life together, had loved completely and been loved in return. She continued playing the piano every day, finding solace in the music, feeling Carter's presence in every note. Zara lived another 7 years, teaching, playing, sharing her gift with anyone who wanted to learn. When she passed away in 1925, at the age of 69, it was in the music room, seated at the Steinway piano that had brought her and Carter together 47 years earlier. Her fingers rested on the keys as if she had just finished playing, and those who found her said there was a smile on her face. The piano was inherited by Thomas, who kept it in pristine condition and eventually donated it to the conservatory where he taught, with a plaque that read, "In memory of Zara Wellington Owens and Carter Owens, whose love story began with music and lasted a lifetime." And sometimes, late at night when the conservatory was empty and quiet, people swear they can hear the faint strains of a piano playing, a melody that sounds like love and longing and two hearts finding their way home to each other. The music plays on, a testament to a freight hauler who kept his promise, and a woman whose music touched his heart. Two people who proved that love can bridge any distance and overcome any obstacle. Their story lived on through their children and grandchildren, through the students Zara taught, and the lives she touched with her music. The freight business Carter built continued to thrive under James's leadership, and eventually his children's leadership, expanding and adapting with the changing times. The compositions Zara created were published and performed, her talent finally receiving the recognition it deserved. But the true legacy of Carter and Zara Owens was simpler and more profound than business success or musical achievement. It was the proof that love, real love, is worth fighting for. That sometimes the greatest treasures come in unexpected forms. That a chance encounter can change the course of a life. And that music, whether played on ivory keys or in the symphony of two hearts beating as one, has the power to transform everything. The piano that traveled across the Wild West in 1878, surviving outlaws and floods and mountain passes, became more than just an instrument. It became a symbol of perseverance, of beauty in harsh places, of love that endures. And every time someone plays it, every time music fills the air, Carter and Zara's story begins again, a testament to the day he transported a piano west, and the woman playing it at the destination played his heartstrings, creating a melody that would echo through generations and remind everyone who hears it that true love is the most beautiful music of all.